How many times has your mouth cost you more than your mistake? Not the action, not the failure, just the one sentence you said too soon. The reaction you couldn't pull back. The moment you let your emotions speak louder than your discipline and watched everything unravel because of it. You weren't a bad man, just an untrained one. Because in that split second, you weren't speaking from strength, you were speaking from the wound, and everyone could feel it. We've all been there. But then, there's another kind of man. He hears the insult, the dig, the bait, and while the room holds its breath, waiting for him to bite, he doesn't. He just stares, breathes, lets silence stretch, and somehow, in that stillness, he becomes the one everyone watches. He didn't win with words. He won with control. Most men think strength is about striking back. That presence comes from volume, but real power lives in the pause, in the refusal to be dragged into the noise, in the choice to command, not chase. Because when you learn to control what you say, you don't just avoid mistakes. You build gravity. You become the man who doesn't speak to prove something. You speak when it's time to shift the room. And that's what this video is about. Stay with me, because in the next few minutes, you'll learn how to stop giving away power with your words and start building a presence that speaks before you do, not by being louder, but by becoming impossible to ignore, even in silence. Before we go deeper, let me ask you something. What's one moment where silence earned you more respect than speaking ever could? Drop it in the comments. Because this isn't just a video, it's a brotherhood of men learning to lead through restraint. The cost of one word. No man is hurt but by himself. Marcus Aurelius. You said it. And the moment it left your lips, you wanted to rewind time. You weren't even angry before. You were just provoked. Maybe it was a sarcastic dig, a passive-aggressive comment in front of people you respected, or someone questioning your worth when you were already running on low sleep and high stress. And suddenly, without thinking, you snapped. You raised your voice. Or worse, you said something that didn't just hurt them. It disrespected you, not because it was loud, or cruel, or wrong, but because it wasn't you at your best. It was your ego, unfiltered. It was the boy inside the man, still fighting for control. And here's the truth. No one likes to say out loud, most men don't lose respect because they fail. Most men lose respect because they can't control their mouth when their emotions spike. The world doesn't see your intentions. It sees your reactions, and it remembers the worst ones. You think you're defending your pride, but every impulsive word chips away at your presence. You might win the argument, but you'll lose the gravity, because people don't follow loud men. They follow composed men. Men whose silence makes others sit up. Men who make space heavy, without raising their tone. Here's the hard truth. No one ruins your image faster than you. When you let your emotions speak before your values do. That's the trigger, and it's everywhere. It shows up in meetings, when someone cuts you off and you raise your voice to reclaim ground only to look insecure. It shows up in relationships, when she pushes a button and instead of standing firm, you lash out. Because deep down, you still think volume equals dominance. It shows up in friendships, when jokes go too far and you react instead of responding. And it shows up in your inner monologue, when you beat yourself up over things you could have simply paused for. And pause is the key. Most men think power means action. Stoicism teaches the opposite. Power means restraint, not passivity, not weakness, but the strength to choose your response rather than be enslaved by your reflexes. Marcus Aurelius said, "No man is hurt but by himself." You weren't hurt because of what they said. You were hurt because you gave them the steering wheel to your mood. You let them pull your trigger, and you fired on instinct. But what if you didn't? What if, next time, you felt that adrenaline, that heat rising in your chest, and instead of speaking, you paused, you breathed, you waited 5 seconds, you chose your words, like a man carving his reputation, not defending his ego. That's what emotionally disciplined men do. They don't react to noise. They respond to purpose. And when they speak, it's intentional, it's deliberate, it's final. Because in a world full of men who shout to be heard, the one who pauses commands. So ask yourself honestly, when was the last time you paused before you spoke? When was the last time you walked away from a fight, not because you were scared, but because you had nothing to prove, because you were the mountain, not the storm? If that's not how you've been living, you're not broken. You're just untrained. And the next few minutes are going to change that. Because when you learn to control what you say, you're not just mastering your mouth, you're mastering you. Strong men speak less. You don't need to raise your voice to prove anything. Real alphas move through the world with a kind of quiet certainty that doesn't beg for attention. It commands it. In a culture obsessed with noise, clapping back, and making a scene, we've confused volume with value. But here's the truth. Real power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to. Because the man who knows who he is doesn't need to shout it. He becomes the cliff, unshaken, unmoved, while the waves crash against him. Loudness often comes from fear. Fear of being ignored, of being disrespected, of being unseen. So men overtalk, overreact, over-explain. But when your words are too available, they lose their weight. You become predictable, replaceably. But the man who chooses his silence, who speaks with precision and purpose, carries a different gravity. People don't just hear him. They lean in for it. He doesn't dominate the room with volume. He anchors it with presence. Think about the last time you met someone who barely spoke, but somehow held the entire room. He wasn't seeking approval. He wasn't performing. He just was. Rooted. And you remembered him. Not because of what he said, but because of everything he didn't need to say. That's the kind of presence that sticks. That's what masculinity looks like when it matures. Because anyone can yell, anyone can fill the silence with noise. But it takes something deeper to sit in silence and let your presence speak for you. The truth is, you can't fake stillness. You can't fake self-command. And the men who try, who talk over others, who explain every thought, who react to every slight, they reveal how little control they actually have. A man in control doesn't need to respond to every jab. He doesn't need to make his case to people who don't see him. He doesn't react for validation. He chooses when and how to respond. Not because he's suppressing emotion, but because he's translating it into power. Marcus Aurelius said, "Be like the cliff against which the waves continually break, but it stands firm." That's your blueprint. Not the storm, not the noise, not the man trying to prove himself to the world, but the one who doesn't need the world to clap for him in the first place. Because here's the secret most men never learn. Stillness isn't passive, it's potent. And silence, when it's chosen, not from fear, but from clarity, is one of the most disarming forces you'll ever wield. So if you want to be the man they respect, the man they remember, the man they don't cross twice, it won't come from raising your voice. It'll come from lowering your need to be heard. Because the real alpha isn't the loudest one in the room. He's the one everyone waits for when he finally decides to speak. The power of silence. There's a kind of silence that doesn't feel empty. It feels charged, like a held breath before impact, like thunder in the distance before it strikes. And if you've ever been in a room where one man chooses silence while others argue, you've felt it. It's not passivity, it's control. Because silence, when used with precision, hits harder than any retort, any clapback, any clever comeback. Most men don't understand this. They think strength is in the volume. They think dominance is about the quickness of your response. But the real shift happens the moment you realize that not every attack deserves a defense. Not every insult needs an answer. Not every challenge is worth your energy, because every time you speak, you're spending power, and the man who speaks less, by choice, is the one who keeps that power in reserve until it matters most. You see, we've been trained by culture to respond instantly. Social media trains your brain to react, argue, prove, validate, but silence breaks that pattern. Silence unnerves, because it forces people to sit in their own noise. It reveals the insecurity in others. It throws them off balance, not because you fought back, but because you didn't need to. Imagine this: someone mocks you in front of others. A dig designed to get under your skin. The room watches, waiting to see how you'll respond. Most men defend, explain, strike back, but the one who pauses, who lets the insult echo into stillness, who looks the other person in the eye without flinching and says nothing, he owns the moment, because silence says, "You're not worth the effort." And I don't need to perform for anyone here. There is no greater discomfort for a petty man than being met with composure. He's expecting ego. He's expecting fire. But what he gets instead is stone, still, unmoving. And that's when he begins to feel small. That's when the crowd begins to wonder, who really holds the power here? Seneca said, "Make the mind tougher by exposing it to adversity." That doesn't mean picking fights. It means standing firm when tested. It means choosing not to explain your worth to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. It means using silence, not as avoidance, but as a blade so sharp it doesn't need to be drawn. Because when you speak, every time you're triggered, you're training others to control you. You're teaching them that your emotions are accessible, predictable, exploitable, but when you choose silence, deliberately, consciously, you're sending a different message. You don't move me. You don't own my reaction. You don't get access to my fire, mate. And that's when your silence becomes unforgettable. The men who've mastered this don't seek to win arguments. They shift the room with presence. They know their worth doesn't need defending. They speak when they intend to shape the moment, not when they're baited into it. And because of that, their silence becomes heavier than others' words. It's not emptiness. It's intention. It's not weakness. It's strategy, and it commands more than noise ever could. So the next time someone tries to provoke you, don't rush to respond. Don't reach for the clever line. Don't fall into the trap of proving yourself. Just pause. Just hold. Let the silence wrap around the moment like armor. Let them wonder what you're thinking. Let them feel their words bounce off a wall they cannot penetrate. Because in that moment, you're not losing the fight. You're showing them, without saying a word, that you never needed one. Training your temper into power. You weren't born calm. You weren't born composed. You were born with fire in your chest and instinct in your blood. And that fire, it's powerful. It's real. But if you don't learn to train it, it'll burn everything you're trying to build. Emotions aren't the enemy. Reactivity is. What most men call temper or passion is really just untamed circuitry. A survival pattern left unchecked. Your brain, when triggered, doesn't pause to think. It fires. It dumps cortisol and adrenaline into your system and demands action. That's why you lash out, raise your voice, interrupt, or say something you regret. Not because you're weak, but because you're running a script written by stress, not strategy. But here's the part no one tells you. You can rewire that script. You can retrain your emotional reflexes the same way you train a muscle. Through repetition, resistance, and real awareness. That space between stimulus and response, that's where your new identity is forged. Not in avoiding anger, but in refining it. Emotional fire, when untrained, is a weapon against yourself. But when sharpened and shaped, it becomes command presence. It becomes energy you channel, not energy you leak. The men who master this don't suppress their emotions, they repurpose them. They don't fake being calm. They become calm because they've trained for it. They've practiced sitting with the burn and not reacting. They've turned the pause into a power move. And here's the key. You don't need to kill the fire. You need to own it. You need to know what sets you off, and then choose how to respond before the moment arrives. Because if you wait until you're angry to control your temper, it's already too late. The work is done before the trigger, in the quiet moments, in how you talk to yourself, how you breathe, how you think. Epictetus said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." Your first battle isn't with the world. It's not with her words, their opinions, or the noise around you. Your first battle is within. Can you feel the heat rising? And not move until you decide how. Can you hold the pressure and still choose principle over impulse? That's emotional discipline. That's self-command. That's the difference between being reactive and being respected. You want to know why some men walk into a room and carry weight without saying much? It's not because they've never been angry. It's because they've trained themselves to respond, not react. They've rewired the fire. They've turned emotional spikes into signals, not orders. When the pressure rises, they don't explode. They decide. And that decision, made in silence, is what separates men who are remembered from men who are dismissed. You can start small. The next time something bothers you, don't talk. Observe. Feel the fire rise, but don't let it control your hands or your voice. Count 5 seconds. Breathe low into your gut. Ask yourself, will this reaction serve my identity or sabotage it? Will it elevate me or expose me? Because when you speak out of impulse, you give your power away. But when you train your response, your words become rare, measured, intentional. And that's what people feel. You're no longer just another man with emotions. You're a man who's in command of what others can't even name in themselves. So don't extinguish the fire. Reshape it. Refocus it. Turn it into presence. Because when you control what you say, not by suppressing it, but by mastering it, you become the man who leads, not by volume, but by vibration. And in that space, in that stillness, you'll find what most men never touch: clarity under pressure and freedom from the chaos within. Say less, mean more. Control doesn't reveal itself in the quiet moments. It shows up when the pressure hits. when the moment gets heated, when you're being tested in front of others, that's when your real discipline, or your lack of it, speaks louder than anything you say. An alpha isn't a man who dominates people. He's a man who dominates himself, especially when it matters most. And when that self-mastery shows up in your words, or in your decision not to speak, that's when people stop treating you like noise and start treating you like presence. Here are 5 moments where most men fall into emotional reflex, but a man of command responds with intention. You've seen these situations. Maybe you've lived them. The question is, will you continue to react like the rest, or respond like a man who's trained? Moment 1. When she disrespects you in public. You're with a group, could be friends, could be her family, could be strangers at a dinner table, and she says something cutting, passive-aggressive, maybe sarcastic. It's meant to make you look small in front of everyone. The room pauses, waiting for your reaction. The untrained man jokes back, trying to save face with false confidence. The reactive man snaps, raises his tone, defends himself. But the man of presence, he does something different. He holds eye contact. He doesn't smile, doesn't respond. He lets the silence grow uncomfortable, and in that silence, something shifts. She realizes she crossed a line. The room senses the tension, not because of what you said, but because of what you didn't say. Your stillness becomes a mirror, and everyone sees what they weren't supposed to. That's power. That's control. That's not being afraid to let the moment breathe without needing to fill it. Moment 2. When a coworker undermines you. You've prepared. You've brought value. You're presenting your vision or idea, and mid-sentence, a coworker cuts in, dismisses your point, tries to correct you in front of the room. Most men will react fast, defend the slide, raise their voice, prove their position. But here's what the man of command does. He stops speaking, turns calmly to the one who interrupted, and listens in silence. Not because he agrees, but because he's choosing his moment. He then resumes, not in retaliation, but with calm continuation. As I was saying, no emotional spike, no energy wasted, just a simple reclaiming of space that tells everyone, I don't fight for my place. I own it. You don't gain respect by overpowering others. You gain it by showing you're not shaken by the attempt. Moment 3. When a friend's joke crosses the line. You're out. Casual setting. The guys are joking around. Then one of them says something about you. Too personal, too targeted, maybe something you confided in him before. The joke lands awkward. Everyone laughs. But they look to you, waiting for your reaction. You have options. You can laugh along and betray your own boundaries. You can call him out and make it tense. Or you can pause, look him in the eye, and say nothing. Just a look, a small shake of the head. Not from emotion, but from awareness. And then change the subject, or walk away. That's the alpha response. Because you're not just correcting him, you're signaling to everyone there, I don't fight for validation, I fight for integrity. And when it's crossed, I don't need to explain. I just remove my energy. Presence withdrawn is often louder than words spoken. Moment 4. When someone pokes at your past. Maybe it's your career, your divorce, a mistake from your past. Someone brings it up in a way that's meant to poke you, maybe at a reunion, at a family gathering, or even online. They say it with a smirk, as if your low point defines you. And just like that, the trigger's there. The normal man bites back, tries to explain the truth, to clear his name, to win the approval of the crowd. But the man of restraint smiles, not out of agreement, but out of control. He doesn't defend the past because he's no longer living in it. He doesn't owe them a speech. The only thing he owes himself is staying in character. When you refuse to engage, you reclaim the narrative. You say, without saying it, that chapter may have shaped me, but it doesn't own me. And if you're still stuck there, I've clearly outgrown you. And that's how silence becomes evolution. Moment 5. When a stranger tries to provoke you. You're out in public. Someone bumps into you, makes a snide comment. Maybe it's at the gym, in traffic, in a bar. Their energy is bait. They want to start something. This is where most men prove how untrained they are. Their pride says, you can't let that slide. So they react. They puff up. They posture. And just like that, the stranger owns their mood. But a man of command doesn't step into chaos. He disengages with precision, doesn't flinch, doesn't curse. Maybe a slight grin, maybe not even a word. He lets the other man drown in his own noise while he walks away untouched. Why? Because a real man doesn't hand his emotional remote to strangers, and he doesn't confuse violence with value. He knows the loudest guy in the room is usually the most afraid. Each of these moments is a test, not of how smart you are, not how fast you can think on your feet, but how well you've trained your nervous system to serve your identity, not betray it. Because every reaction is either reinforcing the man you want to be or exposing the boy you used to be. Seneca said, "Don't let your reflection be in the eyes of others. Look within. That's the code. You don't perform for the room. You don't explain yourself to people who wouldn't understand anyway. You respond only when your principles say it's worth it. And when it's not, you let the silence speak for you. Because in those 5 moments, where most men fall apart, you'll stand up without noise, and the room will feel it. When control becomes who you are, something shifts when you stop explaining, when you stop reacting, when you stop feeling the need to prove your worth through words. At first, it's subtle. You speak less. You start listening, not to respond, but to observe. You hold your fire. You watch people scramble to fill the silence that once used to consume you, and you realize you don't miss it. You stop volunteering your thoughts in every conversation. You stop defending your decisions to people who never had the capacity to understand your path. You stop trying to be agreeable, likable, understandable. You just become solid. And what you once thought was suppression becomes command. This is the part they never prepare you for. The part where you're no longer triggered, no longer baited, no longer moved by cheap shots or hollow praise. You start making people uncomfortable, not by doing anything, but by doing nothing. You stop laughing at jokes that cross lines. You stop nodding just to keep the peace. And suddenly, people look at you differently. They hesitate before they speak to you. They think twice before crossing you, not because you threatened them, but because your energy changed. You used to feel invisible when you were quiet. Now your silence holds weight. You used to need to be heard. Now people remember what you didn't say. Because you've become the man who doesn't just control what he says. You control what others feel when they're around you. Marcus Aurelius said, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." And now you live it. You don't mimic chaos. You neutralize it. You don't match energy. You reset the room with your presence. And where once you poured yourself out just to be acknowledged, you now guard your words like a weapon. Selective, precise, calculated. This is the transformation from noise to depth, from reaction to restraint, from chasing attention to radiating gravity. You've stopped being the man who explains, and you've become the man they can't stop watching. Speak like a man who leads. There will always be someone trying to provoke you, someone trying to drag you into noise, someone who wants a reaction because they can't handle your silence. Let them. You're no longer here to convince. You're no longer explaining your path to people who've never walked it. You've evolved past the need to be understood, because the man who truly controls what he says controls the frame. You've felt the shift. You've tasted the calm that comes from not responding, from letting people sit with their own chaos while you stay rooted. You no longer move on impulse. You speak when it serves your mission, and not a moment before. You've learned that your voice is not a weapon to be drawn quickly. It's a force to be reserved, sharpened, and released only when it serves something higher. Because a man who speaks out of ego loses power, but a man who speaks from clarity, from presence, from principle, he doesn't just get heard, he gets followed. And when others try to test you, bait you, shake you, your silence says it all. Because you are no longer a slave to emotion, you are no longer dictated by reaction. You have become what most men never master: calm in the fire, still in the storm, dangerous only when you choose to be. You don't need the last word. You are the final presence. Speak less, command more. That's your edge. That's your armor. That's your new standard. And now, you don't just control what you say. You own what you don't. The world needs men who command themselves. The truth is, most men were never taught this, never shown how to pause before reacting, never told that silence could be stronger than shouting, that presence could be sharper than pride. But you've seen it now. You've felt the shift. You know what happens when a man chooses restraint over noise, discipline over ego. And if it hits something real in you, it's not just for you. There are men out there, right now, losing battles, not because they're weak, but because no one ever gave them the tools to stay still under fire. Men who are tired of being ignored, tired of being told to man up while their emotions eat them alive, tired of feeling invisible in a world that only hears the loudest voices. When you subscribe to this channel, you're not just upgrading your own life, you're helping build a space where silence is power, where emotional discipline isn't mocked, it's respected, where men learn to stop chasing validation and start mastering themselves. You're helping spread something rare. You're reminding men that real strength doesn't need to perform. So, if this resonated, if something clicked deep down, join us. Be part of a community that's not trying to be louder, but wiser, sharper, and unshakably calm. Because this isn't just content, it's a movement, and we're only just getting started. Speak less, command more, subscribe, and help change what it means to be a man.